people think about World War II air power, they picture fighters and bombers. But wars aren't won by firepower alone. They're won by movement. Every soldier deployed, every vehicle delivered, every operation sustained depended on aircraft designed not to fight, but to carry. The United States entered World War II without a dedicated global airlift doctrine, yet ended the war operating the most complex transport system in history. From improvised civilian airliners to purpose-built cargo aircraft, U.S. transport planes quietly reshaped how modern warfare was supplied, reinforced, and sustained across oceans and continents. As we go through every U.S. transport aircraft used in WWII, step by step, in real historical order, pay attention to which design surprised you, or which you think mattered more than they're usually credited for. Pre-war and commercial transports pressed into service, 1930–1941. Douglas DC-2. Introduced in the mid-1930s, the DC-2 was one of the first modern all-metal airliners pressed into limited military service. Though quickly eclipsed by newer designs, it helped the Army Air Corps experiment with longer-range personnel and cargo movement, proving that air transport could replace slow rail and sea routes for priority missions. Douglas DC-3, C-47, Skytrain. The DC-3 was the single most important transport aircraft of the war. When militarized as the C-47, it gained a reinforced floor, cargo door, and hoist attachment points. Its reliability, range, and ability to operate from rough airstrips made it indispensable. Long before Pearl Harbor, the DC-3 had already shown that airlift could be routine, scalable, and dependable. Curtiss C-46 Commando, early procurement context. Although not yet widely deployed, the C-46's development began before U.S. entry into the war. Designed as a high-capacity commercial transport, it reflected growing awareness that future conflicts would require aircraft capable of hauling heavier loads over longer distances, especially in challenging climates. Lockheed Model 10. Electra. Originally a sleek twin-engine passenger aircraft, the Electra saw limited military use for staff transport and courier duties. Its speed and modern construction made it useful for command mobility, even if its payload capacity limited broader logistical roles. Lockheed Model 14, Super Electra. More capable than the Model 10, the Super Electra bridged the gap between early airliners and wartime transports. Several were adapted for military use, reinforcing the idea that civilian aircraft could be rapidly converted into strategic assets. Early war light utility and liaison transports, 1941–1943. Beechcraft C-45, Expeditor. Based on a civilian executive aircraft, the C-45 became a versatile light transport used across all theaters. It carried small cargo loads, VIP passengers, and critical documents, linking rear headquarters with forward units. While its payload was modest, its speed and reliability made it invaluable for time-sensitive missions that kept large formations functioning smoothly. Noorduyn UC-64 Norseman. Designed for rugged, undeveloped environments, the Norseman excelled where infrastructure was minimal. Its ability to operate on wheels, skis, or floats allowed it to reach Arctic regions, jungle clearings, and isolated outposts. The UC-64 became a logistical lifeline in areas where conventional supply methods were impossible. Fairchild C-82 development context. Although it would not see combat service until after the war, early wartime studies and prototypes of the C-82 reflected a growing recognition that future transports would need dedicated rear-loading designs. These concepts emerged directly from limitations encountered with earlier aircraft during the first years of the conflict. Stinson L-5 Sentinel. While best known as a liaison aircraft, the L-5 frequently served as a light transport for personnel, medical evacuation, and small cargo. Its short takeoff and landing capability allowed it to operate close to the front lines, making it an essential connector between ground forces and higher command. Standard medium transport workhorses, 1942 and 1945. C-47 Skytrain. The C-47 became the most widely used U.S. transport aircraft of World War II. Capable of carrying troops, vehicles, artillery, or fully loaded cargo pallets, it was rugged enough to land on dirt strips and damaged runways. Beyond logistics, the C-47 defined airborne warfare, deploying paratroopers and towing gliders during major operations such as Normandy and Market Garden. Its versatility ensured it remained indispensable from the war's opening stages through final victory. Douglas C-53 Skytrooper. A specialized variant of the C-47, the C-53 was optimized specifically for paratroop operations. It lacked certain cargo handling features but provided seating and layout better suited for airborne infantry. While produced in smaller numbers, it demonstrated how transport aircraft could be tailored for specific tactical roles without redesigning an entirely new airframe. Curtiss C-46 Commando. Larger and more powerful than the C-47, the C-46 was designed for heavy payloads and long-distance flights. It became especially critical in the China-Burma-India theater, flying supplies over the Himalayas in the infamous Hump airlift. Although mechanically demanding and sometimes unreliable, its capacity made missions possible that no other aircraft of its class could accomplish. Heavy and long-range transport aircraft, 1942-1945. Douglas C-54 Skymaster. The C-54 was the first U.S. transport aircraft truly suited for intercontinental operations. With 4 engines and a spacious fuselage, it could carry heavy cargo loads over long distances with reliability unmatched by earlier designs. The Skymaster became central to transoceanic supply routes, ferrying troops, vehicles, and high-priority equipment between the United States, Europe, and the Pacific. Its performance demonstrated that airlift could supplement, and sometimes replace, maritime transport for strategic movement. Consolidated C-87 Liberator Express. Converted from the B-24 bomber airframe, the C-87 reflected wartime urgency rather than ideal design. Its long range made it useful for hauling cargo across vast distances, particularly in the Pacific and China-Burma-India theaters. However, its high-altitude bomber origins made it difficult to handle when heavily loaded, limiting its effectiveness. Even so, the C-87 filled critical gaps when no other aircraft could meet immediate logistical demands. Douglas C-74 Globemaster. Arriving late in the war and produced in very small numbers, the C-74 was a glimpse of the future. Designed from the outset as a heavy transport, it offered superior payload capacity and range. Though its wartime impact was limited, it validated concepts that would shape post-war airlift doctrine and influence later strategic transport aircraft. Glider and Assault Transport Systems, 1942-1945. Waco CG-4A. Hadrian. The CG-4A was the primary U.S. military glider of the war and one of the most produced transport platforms in American history. Capable of carrying troops, jeeps, artillery pieces, or ammunition, it was towed into combat zones by C-47s and released near landing sites. Its wooden and fabric construction made it inexpensive but vulnerable, yet it allowed airborne forces to arrive with equipment that parachutes could not safely deliver. The CG-4A played a decisive role in Normandy, Operation Market Garden, and later Rhine crossings. Waco CG-13. Developed as a larger successor to the CG-4A, the CG-13 could carry heavier payloads, including light vehicles and bulk cargo. It addressed limitations discovered during early airborne operations, where landing forces often lacked sufficient firepower or mobility. Although introduced later in the war and used in smaller numbers, it represented an important evolutionary step in assault transport capability. Troop carrier and tow aircraft integration. Glider operations were inseparable from powered transports, particularly the C-47. These aircraft had to generate enough lift to tow fully loaded gliders while still maintaining range and safety margins. This requirement shaped training, aircraft modifications, and operational planning, turning transport squadrons into precision assault delivery units rather than simple cargo haulers. Amphibious and Special Role Transport Aircraft, 1941-1945. Consolidated PBY Catalina. Although widely known as a patrol bomber, the PBY Catalina performed a vital transport role throughout the war. Its long range and ability to land on open water allowed it to move personnel, supplies, and medical evacuees between islands and remote bases. In areas where airstrips were non-existent or damaged, the Catalina functioned as a floating transport aircraft, maintaining supply lines that would otherwise have been impossible to sustain. Grumman J2F Duck. The J2F Duck was a compact amphibious aircraft used for light transport, courier duties, and recovery missions. Its ability to operate from both land and sea made it especially useful for moving personnel between ships, coastal bases, and isolated outposts. While its payload was limited, its flexibility made it indispensable in naval and expeditionary environments. Sikorsky R-4 Hoverfly. The R-4 was the world's first mass-produced military helicopter and introduced an entirely new form of vertical transport. Though limited in capacity and range, it was used to move personnel short distances and conduct medical evacuation in terrain inaccessible to fixed-wing aircraft. Its operational use during WWII marked the beginning of rotary wing transport as a permanent component of military logistics. By the end of World War II, the United States had done more than field a collection of transport aircraft. It had built the world's first truly global airlift system. What began as improvised use of civilian airliners evolved into a layered logistics network with light aircraft handling command mobility, medium transports sustaining daily operations, heavy aircraft bridging continents, and specialized platforms solving problems. Geography once made impossible. Each aircraft filled a specific role, and none existed in isolation. The success of airborne operations depended on medium transports. Intercontinental campaigns relied on heavy lifters. Remote island warfare required amphibious solutions. Even early helicopters, limited as they were, proved that vertical transport would redefine future logistics. Most importantly, these aircraft changed how wars were planned. Commanders could now assume movement, resupply, and reinforcement by air as a constant rather than a gamble. That assumption reshaped military doctrine long after the shooting stopped. When modern airlift concepts are discussed today, they don't begin in the Cold War. They begin here, with the U.S. transport aircraft of World War II, quietly carrying the weight of victory.